And most people won't even spend 100 hours to understand that we use all our time and our energy, all them hours, thousands, tens of thousands of hours, and we get this thing, we get compensated in this thing called money. But until 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't even know what that was myself. And I was just going around in a circle. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't coming out of that circle and why was I still in the rat race, you know? But
Yeah.
it's only when that kind of clicks, and that clicked for me in 2020 when I discovered that, hang on a minute, the European Central Bank is going to pump maybe 20% of the total amount of money that was ever created in the last 100 years
Tell
in
us
one
about your
year.
story.
Yeah, let's go back. How did you discover Bitcoin?
Uh, yeah, maybe I'll start off maybe a bit about my personal life first of
Yeah,
all, because
yeah.
I think that's kind of shows you how I moved into Bitcoin eventually. So yeah, my background, my education, studied tech, studied economics and business before. So with that kind of background, I was always, I think, naturally going to find my way into a technology that was based on money. But it wasn't an easy, straightforward transition into that whatsoever. So probably like most people, and it's not too dissimilar story to a lot of people previous who've spoken about their Bitcoin story. But yeah, I came across it first of all in 2013, 2014, and I was very dismissive of it. And mainly because, I was looking at stocks beforehand, and I was looking at real estate and things like that, and figuring out how do I get ahead in this world, because obviously working is great. You put in your effort, you get your reward. But I also knew that you had to do something to keep up with inflation and keep up with the world. So you end up becoming this kind of side investor as well. So yeah, I was looking at investments over a long time, and I looked at gold, I looked at silver, I looked at bonds, stocks, real estate, the whole array of assets. And uh, whenever I came, and I read all the books too, Benjamin Graham's books. I was actually I would say a student of Buffett and Munger. I know they're not too popular in the Bitcoin space, but at the end of the day, they had principles that were serving them well for a long time, and I think it's worth studying. So when I came across Bitcoin in 2013, 2014 time, it was a friend that actually said to me, "Look at this thing called Bitcoin." It was, and I kind of heard about it before. I think everybody had heard about it at one point or another, but you don't take it seriously. And it had gone up 10x basically in a space of a few months. And my initial reaction, based on what I've studied and based on what I understood, was, that's something that you don't invest in. All the books and everything tell you that, if something's too good to be true, you don't go after it, you don't go near it. So it crashed down then shortly after that, and I felt vindicated, and I was kind of like, yeah, that's what I expected to happen. It's not going to come back. And in 2016, it started making a few headlines again and started coming back. And I read about it in an article, and it kind of seemed interesting. And you kind of looked and said, why is this coming back? Why is it not going away? And it's had a 7-year track record at that stage, and it was kind of looking like it was going to head in a similar cycle to before. So yeah, 2016, I dabbled in it. I won't say that I understood it. It took probably the next 2 years to really start to understand it. I started studying it a bit more, but yeah, not to say that I fully understand it now, because been on it for years and years, but nobody's an expert. I don't think we're even scratching the surface of how big this will get over time. But I would say, I fully comprehended the idea of what Bitcoin is about 2 years. Started understand it more, started reading all the books, started listening to all the podcasts, listening to all the people that were here previously, read the white paper, read Satoshi's postings and all the forums, and yeah, really dove really, really deep into the topic. And I think, yeah, that heightened my conviction. So look, and that time as well, I was in trading altcoins and stuff like that, and jumping on and out of things. And as I say, that's how you know that you don't really understand it. If you don't understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, then you really understand neither. So yeah, 2018, started studying it more, really got into it, started writing a few articles on it, and I didn't publish any, but I started writing down things that I wanted to talk about. I spoke to quite a lot of friends and family across 2018, 2019, 2020, and it was very difficult. And everybody's had this as a Bitcoiner who really understands the topic, and trying to get that message out. It's a difficult message, Lawrence. I'm sure everyone's been at it yourself as well. And it's not an easy topic to get to the bottom of with most people, like it was for myself. You know, as I say, 2 years having the background I have, still didn't get it for quite a while. So it's nuanced, it's nascent in a way. It's not something that you've seen before, really. So from 2018 to 2020, well, really starting in 2016 to 2020, studied quite a lot. Ended up butting my head against the wall, trying to show people what it is and trying to get people to understand it. And it was largely ignored. You know, people still listen, but listen and understand is two different things. So I ended up taking those articles and ended up starting to write more and more. Then between 2020 and you know, COVID happened, everything happened, and I think accelerated the understanding of Bitcoin for many, include myself even, and that was kind of the best example I think for most people at that point. So started writing more about it, and then by the end of 2021, I had a book written. So I wrote the book Why Bitcoin. It's not a large book, and one of the main reasons writing it as well is because I think there's a lot of content out there, and everybody has their own angle, and you know, you can kind of see Michael Saylor, who's very popular in this space, describe Bitcoin, and I love his analogies, and I think they're on point. But it was also starting to talk about, you know, how it was in the corporate world, and you know, how you know, you had negative yield on bonds and things like that. But you know, what does a negative yield on bond mean to the average person? Then you had very philosophical podcasters, you know, Robert Breedlove, you know, talking really deep into, you know, Bitcoin as truth and all that. And again, that doesn't resonate with a lot of people. Now, this is all good content. And again, if you're on Bitcoin a while, you know, I listen to it still. And, you know, then you had Greg Foss, you know, talking about credit default swaps and stuff like that. And like all this was kind of going over a lot of people's heads, and it was hard to find an example to show people. And there's very good content creators out there. I'm not saying that I cracked it, but my angle for the book was to try and condense a lot of that down into a small enough book where people could pick it up, could read it, could understand it. Very layman, tried to break it down. And yeah, that it would appeal to the majority of people who are the people who don't understand it at the moment. I think we kind of get into this world where, you know, you're in describing Bitcoin, people who already understand Bitcoin, and you know, that's good to kind of enhance your conviction and, you know, raises your conviction. But I think the target audience for, if you believe that Bitcoin is the future and it's going to make the world better, should be the people who don't understand it. And that was the intention of the book originally. So yeah, I've done podcasts, conferences since then. So right up until today, yeah, I'm going to create more educational content in Bitcoin. And yeah, I see myself spending probably the rest of my life in this space. So that's kind of it, Lawrence. So started in 2014, very naive and dismissive of it. Gained more conviction in 2016 when I seen it wasn't going away. 2018 then really dug in, did the proof of work. 2020, 2021 wrote the book, and then yeah, I've been doing podcasts and yeah, doing talks and everything since 2022. So that's kind of it in a 5-minute summary of my Bitcoin journey so far.
Very good, very good. And then what can you see like from when people talk about adoption and stuff like that? Yeah, in your area, where exactly are you based? You're up in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, in the Northwest. So adoption, yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest, in the adoption in this part of the world. Now, I see what's happening in the US at the moment. I think they're definitely on the front foot. I see what's happening in South America, Central America at the moment, and I think there's clear adoption there. I think in Africa there's clear need for Bitcoin and a desire for Bitcoin. And I'm not saying everywhere, but you know, it's, I would say, orders of magnitude larger than the adoption happening here. And in Europe in general, I know Germany has a big Bitcoin presence there, and we don't always hear about it. And maybe some of the English speaking media outlets, but there's still progress there. But I would say in the northwest of Ireland, UK, yeah, it's not quite there. And I don't see as many people speaking about it as I would like to see at this stage. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. And again, I think the best comparison these days, I know you can compare Bitcoin to, a real innovation for humanity, like fire and electricity and stuff like that, and say like this is a real groundbreaking moment. But in recent times, it's like the internet. But if you tried to describe people in the 1980s, 1990s, it was difficult, to broach that subject again and talk about it and explain it. I think people would have got it by, yeah, if they were in technology maybe, or they were in the maybe telecoms area. But yeah, whenever it comes to money, I don't think a lot of people are asking the right questions about what is money. I think people see the problem, but they're not seeing the solution. So yeah, in terms of adoption, there is a Northwest Bitcoin hub here as well that a friend of mine runs, and it's slow in the uptake, which, as I say, that's a disappointing piece in it. But I have been seeing a change, I would say, in the last 6 to 12 months. I speak about it personally more in my life to people, colleagues, and work and family and friends, and the sentiment is definitely different. So I can see the tide turning, but I still think there's a lot of work to do. And as I say, not just the northwest of Ireland, I think the whole of Ireland. I think what you're doing and what other people I see in this space in Ireland are doing is amazing. I think we keep having to work harder and harder and get that message through. And the only reason you do it is obviously we've all got a certain amount of investment in Bitcoin, so people can say, oh, it's just to pump your bags or whatever. But once you really get into it, you realize that it's going to be for the betterment of everyone in that general area. And I don't want this part of the world left behind when other parts of the world are accelerating their Bitcoin footprint.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a good point there what you say there about because we have it, people think we're just trying to pump our bags, but it's not really. What most people don't understand is we're trying to show people what we've discovered. Yeah, we've discovered hope and some insurance for we can see, well, I can see a lot of madness coming, you know what I mean? A lot of change coming, yeah, towards onto the planet with all different things that are happening and all different organizations that are trying to take over countries and new types of currencies coming and the issue with the dollar and stuff like that, you know. And
Yeah,
so it's not really, as I said again, to pump our bags. It's trying to help people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a lot
And
of
look,
people just don't get that though.
yeah, 100%. And look, if anybody came to me in 2014 and tried to say, go and buy this thing and this is a great investment and stuff like that, it's very difficult to take anyone serious. I think you do need those multiple touch points. But I think also people, and you do have to be open about these things. Like most people, and as I said, I got into it because I was looking at investments. I was trying to store my wealth for the future. I was trying to grow my wealth, and it is an investment vehicle. But you kind of move from, this is an investment vehicle to, this is actually my savings. This is my long-term savings. And you evolve as a Bitcoiner over time, and then you start going, well, you know what? If this is doing this for me, this will do this for this person. That it'll work for the individual, it'll work for the company, it'll work for the government. Whatever level that you want to pitch Bitcoin at, it works, and it's a benefit to everyone. So that's kind of, you end up going this journey where you start off as, yeah, this is giving me something. I can see the price going up. It's giving me a bit of freedom. It's giving me a bit of something different that I never had before. To, yeah, this could actually work for other people. You speak to your friends and family, and then you kind of broaden that out and go, well, you know what? If this is going to take place the way the internet took place, imagine Ireland, UK, Europe, without the internet, and the rest of the world is using it. You're like, we need to get this message out here. We need to tell people about it. We need to show them the benefits of it. And again, I think one of the main messages that people have been saying for quite a while is, like, you don't tell people to buy Bitcoin, you tell people to study it and start to understand it. And that's where the education piece comes in. And that's where, shows like this and conversations like this, I'm hoping help people, even if they reach a few people, a few hundred people, a few thousand people, whatever it is. You want to make sure that the message is clear, and that, it's here to better the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just true. People think that you go into Bitcoin. Well, you're attracted by price go up. That's what everybody
Yeah,
wants. But the real way to do is just start learning about what is the problem. Yeah. And when you
yeah,
figure out the problem is the money, like most people don't understand, we spend between 60 and 80,000 hours in our lives, okay, working, the average person, right? And most people won't even spend 100 hours to understand that we use all our time and our energy, all them hours, thousands, tens of thousands of hours, and we get compensated in this thing called money. But until 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't even know what that was myself. And I was just going around in a circle. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't coming out of that circle and why was I still in the rat race, you know? But
Yeah.
it's only when that kind of clicks, and that clicked for me in 2020 when I discovered that, hang on a minute, the European Central Bank is going to pump maybe 20% of the total amount of money that was ever created in the last 100 years in 1 year. So that's what kind of woke me up to it, you know? And
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that went. I like looking at it through the macro lens and the global lens and the geopolitical lens, and I think through Bitcoin you learn a lot about this as well. And you've never asked those questions before. I never asked what is money, and you can go back through the whole history. And I'm not going to go under the seashells and sand and rocks conversation again, because I think that's been done to death for Bitcoiners. But it's a very important thing to understand, where money came from and how we got here. But as you said, in 2020, we've seen quite a lot of people that were unemployed and businesses shut down. And a country's really, it's really measured, its GDP is measured on its production, and its output. And everything came to a standstill in terms of output. And not everything, obviously there were still business as usual in certain areas, but productivity was down. And stock prices and asset prices and house prices were going up. And you had a question going, I know always the economy and the stock market aren't correlated exactly, and the stock market isn't the economy, the economy is different from the stock market, but you had all these assets going up and a lot more money in the economy, but a lot less productivity for quite a long time. And that didn't make sense. And then once you start understanding it was because of stimulus and trying to stimulate the economy. That's what happened. And then what we're left with at the end of that is anyone who owns assets in the world, their assets are increasing, and anyone who owns cash, money, or anything below the inflation line is getting poor and getting screwed over. So that was kind of, and that's where the kind of moral ethical piece comes in for a lot of Bitcoiners. They see this and say, well, you know what, if you take that ability for central banks to create money at will when they want, when they need to, you're left with a fixed currency. A lot of decisions are made much more ethically, much more maturely, and with the future in sight. So you kind of switch from this kind of short-term thinking of, if something breaks, I've got a fallback plan, I'll just print money, and at the time that'll solve it. We'll deal with the next problem then a few years down the line, which is probably print more money. And we're kind of in the spiral of, more money printing, more money printing, more money printing, and that's getting out of hand at the minute. The debt is out of hand. Inflation is going to keep increasing over time. Your currency is going to get weaker, and the wealth gap is widening because those who own assets are benefiting the most, but not fixed currency. Everyone has to be more prepared for the future, a lot more planning, a lot more thought into how we make these decisions. And that's what Bitcoin has been brought there to do. It's to take away that kind of short-term thinking, that fallback plan that people have that they think is actually a benefit, of having a money printer, to, what, we have to actually prepare. The only way to sustain growth in a country is to be productive and to do it the right way. Otherwise, we're hurting citizens. So yeah, you can kind of take that whole global view of things, Lawrence. And again, you start off with a small mindset of going, this is an investment for me, to, what, this is actually going to fix a lot of the problems in the world. And again, not just for Ireland, UK, and Europe. I'm glad to see the adoption elsewhere in the world as well. So it is something that I think improves the world, immensely over time.
And let's talk about other assets, okay, that people invest in and how they've been performing compared to the monetary printing or the cost of money, yeah, or the devaluation of money, yeah. Can you go into them a little bit, like property, maybe gold? A lot of
Yeah.
people think gold is an amazing asset to buy, but I don't think they've really done their homework on it and their maths properly.
Yeah. Go. This is probably another part of the journey, Lawrence, where you go from. I think a good angle to see Bitcoin from originally, is after you see it as an investment, is again, it's much more than that. And I don't think, to say what I said for probably 5 minutes into this podcast, is that I think we're only scratching the surface and how we realize how Bitcoin will turn out over the long term. Like I think people see it as, you know, store of value. I know it's going to be a medium of exchange, it's going to be unit of account, but I think it's going to be much more than that. I think it's going to be embedded in the society, and every single decision and every single way that we do. I think it's going to change, you know, social media. It's going to change, you know, how we connect to people. I think it's going to change our communication style. I think there's going to be more honesty and truth in it. So I think basically words are going to have value over time, and I think that's all going to be tied to Bitcoin. And it's changed people's mindset, as in it's woke people up as well to say, you know, if money should be decentralized, should other things be decentralized? But to get back to your question, like that's kind of further down the line, but a good entry point, I think, is to look at gold as an asset and say gold was money for 5,000 years. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but the reason it failed, one of the main reasons that failed is because it was captured and because it was slow. You know, the slow movement. And you look at Bitcoin as an asset, like you can transfer it to anywhere in the world now. Within 10 minutes, you'll have final settlement. You can do Lightning Network payments in an instant as well. That's not possible with gold. Now, gold as an asset can't be inflated, can't be created by mankind. Like people have been trying through alchemy for thousands of years to try and create gold, you know, and it always they failed to do it, which made it for thousands of years a good store of value and a trustable asset. But over the last 100 or so years, gold became more centralized. It became stored in vaults, and people started getting these paper receipts rather than the actual gold itself. And as that became more centralized, along came the fiat system, which basically broke gold together. So gold, to me, it's already done. It was done probably, you could say, in phases. Back when they started doing fractional reserve banking, when they confiscated gold, was another hit to gold. 1971, when they decoupled it from a dollar, was another hit to gold. And especially in 2009 when Bitcoin came, which does the exact same job of gold, but 100 times better. So to see gold as an asset, it's easy comparison to say, yeah, it's got some principles that are very similar to gold. You can't recreate it. You can't it's very unique in its properties, recognizable, divisible, all that, but it lacks a 21st century view from a technology standpoint. So Bitcoin came along and displaced that, and it's already displaced it, and you can see every year it's trending to zero against Bitcoin, and it will continue to do that over time. And there's absolutely zero reason why gold won't trend to zero against Bitcoin. And I don't know why people still advocate for it. Maybe it's an emotional attachment, but you have to look at these things in black and white. Like you could still say there's people still send letters, but what's the percentage of letters that are sent compared to emails? It's tiny. So gold will still be around in some form, but in terms of a monetary asset, it's already been ablated, in my view, by Bitcoin. Now the price will catch up to it and take over it over time, and that's an obvious one. So yeah, gold is it's done already. It's past its analog, its old version of money. Bitcoin's replaced it, and that's all because of technology advancements as well. Now, real estate is another one, and I've been spending more time thinking about this as well in terms of real estate investment. And what you can see over time as well is Bitcoin is going up in price against real estate. But when you look at it just from a purely practical way, again, as that price is going up against housing, so housing is effectively getting cheaper in Bitcoin. You've got a lot of benefits for holding Bitcoin than you do a house these days. So I don't know what it is for the average house in Ireland. Maybe 5 Bitcoin, we'll say, is the average house in Bitcoin terms. That's going to come down again. But as it comes down, and you've got, say, your neighbor holding 5 houses as their investment, and you holding 5 Bitcoin, they got to deal with a lot more problems than what you deal with holding Bitcoin. So you've obviously got people to deal with, and I know people are great, and it's great dealing with people overall, but you're not going to get a perfect person every time in that. So and then there's vacancies and stuff like that. There's maintenance costs, there's repairs, there's insurance, there's management fees, there's all that goes along with real estate. So I think probably a slower one to melt against Bitcoin, but again, I think that's in playing out. You imagine people have started off with the thought of diversifying, and I did this at the start, thought, oh, I'll diversify, and add Bitcoin to my portfolio, and then you start saying, well, instead of diversifying, why am I still holding these other assets? So you kind of more centralize it then towards Bitcoin, and you allocate more and more. So you're actually selling assets to go towards this, towards Bitcoin, and that's happening over and over again. So you can see maybe somebody who's had, again, 5 real estate properties might say next year, I might stick with 4 and sell one and put it on Bitcoin, and that's already a 20% gain. So you're losing the demand from the house price side, and you're gaining it in Bitcoin. And you can imagine how many people who are just with a diversifying mindset will say, I'm going to start doing this. And the more and more they see the outperformance of Bitcoin to housing, you're going to see that happen more rapidly. And again, I think we're talking decades out here, but it's crawling past it at the moment, and I think it's going to end up getting to a point where it's going to look unreasonable to invest a large amount in real estate rather than Bitcoin. So yeah, gold is already, as I say, it's already done for. Real estate is another one that's, I think, on its way. I think there's, as I say, a lot of grounding in society where real estate is seen as a prime asset, and look, it's performed very well. In terms of stocks, I would say a lot more risky than Bitcoin, and I know that sounds bizarre when you say it to people at the beginning, but you've got a lot of variables you're fighting against with a company. If you're investing in the company, and you can invest in the general stock market, the S&P 500, but is it keeping up with inflation even these days? Or are you just keeping up or maybe falling below the inflation rate when you're investing in the S&P 500 these days? That's debatable some years, but look, average returns fine. It's not going to bankrupt you investing in something like the S&P 500, but it's never going to store your value over time against something like Bitcoin, because it's not as scarce as Bitcoin. There's a lot of, as I say, variables. Like if you're investing then in an individual stock, say a company, for example, then you have to, like, again, going back to Warren Buffett, we don't have the luxury, I mean, of going in and meeting the board and meeting the team and meeting the management and making sure that their head is screwed on and they really understand what they're doing in this. They're ethical. They're going to make the right decisions. There's trust. So a lot of people just blindly trust companies because they see the product, but there's a whole lot extra to invest in stocks. And again, I've done it and some success in that area. But you really have to be in tune. You need to be able to read balance sheets, really. You need to be understand management team. You need to understand the roadmap for the future. You need to understand the products. You need to understand, the longevity of the company, what the future plans are. So there's a lot to it. So individual stocks versus Bitcoin. I understand what Bitcoin is. I understand that all those things that I mentioned before are not in play. So nobody's going to mess with the code because it's built on a strong foundation of consensus. Don't have to worry about shareholders and products and things like that. It's an ecosystem that's gaining traction, which is great. But the fundamental base layer of Bitcoin isn't going to change. So I have a lot of trust in Bitcoin, a lot of stability, and I think that's why people have faith in it. Whereas companies, I think I've seen a stat as well, the average S&P 500 company lasts 21 years. So I know there's ones that can be around for decades and 100 years, Ford and Disney or whatever, but is the growth in those companies really there each time? And yeah, you could end up in that VC world as well, where you're throwing away money and you're gambling, really. So yeah, against stocks as well. And again, this isn't an idea that was formed, well, not by myself as well, because I've heard lots of other people saying it, but on a common sense approach and a rational approach, you're taking something that's very stable, very predictable, isn't changing, versus something that you have to rely quite a lot on management teams making the right decision. And then bonds, I'm not an expert in bonds. I understand it, at a high level. But yeah, at the end of the day, bonds, you're going to have to outpace the rate of inflation again bonds are seen as a safe asset. There is a probability as well there's going to be a debt crisis at the sovereign level, like some countries defaulting on debt, and that's the risk that you carry too. And when you study the fiat system, you see the trajectory that's going. It's not as safe as people make it out to be, put it that way. Now again, is it going to fall over anytime soon. I don't think so. Is it going to fall over eventually? I would say 100%. So that's kind of, Lawrence, my view on those kind of assets. I know there's collectibles and stuff like that, and fine art and all that. And look, anybody can invest in. Well, it's a free market. They can invest in whatever they want. But yeah, I don't see a competitor for Bitcoin for it. Both. It's kind of got that store. Well, it's got that store of value predictability. So whatever you say today, it should be worth the same in the future. But you've also got that kicker now where adoption is kicking in, and so you can actually increase your value over time, and that can create generational wealth, and that's kind of the incentive system that's built into something like Bitcoin. So yeah, it's when you really get into it, it's difficult to bet against it.
Yeah, and just to home in on some of those assets that you were talking about, and something that just came to me, came into my head there a few weeks ago. When people invest in property, most of them don't understand that they have a deposit there, and they probably go and borrow money, which creates more debt. Yeah, we're in a debt spiral already, so they're feeding the system by borrowing more money. Yeah. And then when you buy a property, like say most people that invest in properties, like a second property, I'm just talking about the normal person here. Yeah. They buy a rental property or a third rental property. They're mostly buying a 3-bedroom house. 3-bedroom houses aren't really scarce. Yeah. Now buying something like maybe a house in D4, like in Ball's Bridge, they're scarce. But then you're talking like 2 or 3 million compared to a 3-bedroom house, which would be more affordable for a normal person, which would be like maybe 400,000 or 500,000. Yeah. But they start off only with a deposit. So they're increasing the debt as well, and they're feeding the system. And another thing as well, uh, with property can only be sold really in the local markets to people around them. But we can sell Bitcoin to somebody in Tokyo, somebody in Singapore, somebody in Paris, somebody in Canada, Toronto, New York, anywhere in the world, somebody can buy our Bitcoin from if we ever wanted to sell it. So it's a better asset for moving as well, protecting yourself. What would you say?
Look, I agree 100%. I think it's probably the public sentiment around it that it's a safe investment, it's a lucrative investment, and it has been. And this is a challenge whenever fiat system or an asset has served somebody very well over decades, and it's got that track record, of decades. Then people, the longer it's going to take for somebody to move away from an asset like that. So 100% agree. I do think that there's certain assets that are going to be valuable in the future. Like the Mona Lisa is always going to be valuable. Like it is. There's no way about that, and that's a proper scarce asset. Like beachfront real estate, or as you say, D4 real estate in Ireland, where there's a lot of facilities about, where there's good communities about, safe environments and things like that, are always going to carry a bit more value. But as you say, scarcity plays a part in this as well. So it's scarce because of its location, but you can't also move that property from one place to another. But also, as technology evolves, it's not unreasonable again to think that there's going to be a technology advancement where, I know there's physical barriers to making cement. You can't make it in an instant. You still have to go through a process, but that's all going to be automated. And it is in ways as well. 3D printing is obviously going to be a game changer, I think. And you can also say, land is scarce, so property is scarce. But we've seen property growing up the ways, so it moves horizontally. But you could also, in theory, build.
Land isn't scarce though. Land isn't scarce because I looked into this. Look at the countries that have made land. Look at Dubai. Look at the Middle East. Look what they're doing all over the world. You know what I mean? The Netherlands, they're doing loads of stuff around the world already. So land isn't scarce when you look at it, when you really dig in and look.
100%. Yeah. So the as I say, every argument that you pull of a certain asset, everything can be created one way or another. And as I say, land, like you can create more land off the coast of somewhere by piling sand on it, rearranging the surface of a certain area or city. You can build upwards as well, but it sounds bizarre as well. But in very popular, densely populated areas, you see now where people are building underground as well. And they have these kind of lights in the sky, that come through, like kind of daylight, and these mirrors and stuff that give you kind of natural light underground. So you can build basically 3D anywhere. So it was this very flat, scarce asset originally, but if you can build down, you can build up, you can build wide, it doesn't become as scarce. And as I say, I think there's still going to be desirable property. I still think there's going to be desirable art. I still think there's going to be things that people will desire over time. But when it comes to an overall very safe investment, very safe store of value over time, then there's nothing that compares to Bitcoin. You'd have to be very lucky to get something that's created this year that will hold its value over the next 100 years. That's not Bitcoin. Like, again, the Mona Lisa, like hundreds of years old. It's you're not going to come across that every day. So yeah, it doesn't make sense, I think, to invest in real estate in the long term. I do think it'll take time to break that down in terms of people's understanding, people seeing the flaws in it, and people seeing the benefits of Bitcoin. So I'm not under the illusion that everyone's going to get Bitcoin next year and understand it, but I will say that they're going in the one direction. So one is going up and one is going down in terms of adoption, and I think that will continue long time into the future. And I actually eventually think that we're going to end up in the Bitcoin standard. I know people argue this, but again, you're just playing a scenario out where there's a fixed, decentralized, secure asset that does the job of serving the world over, and it's a technology, so it's going to be adapted easily. It's already adapted everywhere in the world. I'm sure there's not a country in the world where you can't transfer Bitcoin or somebody doesn't use Bitcoin. Probably not a city in the world. But yeah, it's here to stay. It's, to me, you can never say inevitable, but highly probable that this is going to be the money of the future. And that's also for two reasons as well. And I always talk about the trends, like Bitcoin's going this direction in terms of adoption, in terms of price, in terms of everything. But the fiat system is also collapsing in itself. And that's down to, I would say, mainly human behavior. And that's the flaw that I think Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, seen, that it's the trust between systems is the problem. The trust for central banks to behave in the best manner that they can, and I think that's the reason why Satoshi removed themselves from the project, because as good as the thought was to create Bitcoin, you still can't risk being in control of something. So I always say, like, humans in charge of everyone else's money and charge other humans' money is never a good idea over the long term. You've seen it in history. You've seen it in empires before. They always it's the human behavior side of things where sometime, somewhere along the road, someone is going to get in power and destroy that currency. And I think it's not even bad people at this stage now. I think it's bad incentives, and I think there's no choice but to devalue the currency. So as Bitcoin adoption is going up, as the price is going up, fiat system is also destroying itself kind of almost naturally now at this stage.
Yeah. There's big changes coming. Can you talk a little bit about, so we're talking about the fiat system, okay? And we're talking about the debt spiral, what's going on in the world. We can see at the moment, like in June of last year, the debt in America was, and we're talking about the dollar because that is the world reserve currency. It is the strongest currency in the world. In June of last year, the debt cap was at about 31.5 trillion. Yeah. Since then, it's gone up about 1 trillion every 90 days, the debt. There's no debt cap now on the debt in America. So it's getting way out of control. So can we talk a little bit about the BRICS? What's going on with there? Have you been following anything about that?
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. I've been
Yeah,
looking at it closely.
I like this subject because it ties into what I was saying previously too about human behavior. So I think, first of all, again, you always have to go back in history, and when you study these things, you see that there's been multiple reserve currencies, and they last for so long, and they end up going in the same trajectory. I think it's Ray Dalio's done a great piece on that about the change of world order. And again, it's all down to human behavior. You know, good times, everybody's out spending, and nobody's thinking about the future and the long term, and it's great. And not nobody, but you know, overall society, the average is that people are enjoying themselves at that time. And when I say enjoying themselves, probably irresponsibly, at times, and that doesn't last forever, because you take the foot off the brakes in terms of productivity, in terms of focus, and you end up kind of having this society where you think money goes on forever. And you've seen before that, you know, during the Roman Empire, the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, they were all superpowers at one stage, and now it's the US turn, and they are the world reserve currency. And again, how that happened as well over time is a flaw in gold. But I suppose in general, I would say, and again, going back in history before June of last year, where you're saying big increases happened. If I go back to when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, one of the first things that the US did was weaponize the dollar, and to me that was the death of the dollar. I can't remember what month it was in 2022. You know, it was around March, between March and June sometime, I think, in 2022, which is to me the death of the US dollar as a world reserve currency. And again, back to human behavior, it's because the US didn't like what Russia did, and now whether that's right or wrong is a completely different conversation. But the point was, whenever people seen this, other countries seen this, they were like, well, you know, Russia had their intentions, Ukraine had their intentions, whatever happened is none of my business and irrelevant to this topic. But whenever somebody did something that the US didn't like, the US sanctioned them. So a lot of countries around the world hold dollars, and because they hold dollars in there, what if they did something and maybe it wasn't even a non-violent act, and they sanctioned them? So everyone's looking at it and saying, well, now the dollar can be sanctioned from us. China's holding it, and you can see they've depleted their holdings of dollars over the last few years. And again, I think that will continue to happen. Again, all this will happen slowly. The dollar still got value in the world. There's no doubt that it's still the most valuable and powerful currency in the world. But that sent a message to everyone that, you know, they've got a power, they control a lot of things, and if you mess with America and in their view, then you potentially face economical challenges. So that's kind of, even just to take that step back and say, I think that the world reserve currency is already, again, done. I don't know what, sometimes it can be very black and white in these things, but to me, you have to be rational and see how it is. Then it comes on and say, right, what is going to be the competitor then? What is going to take over the dollar? And again, you've seen these cycles of different countries having different currencies that are world reserve currencies. And I think a lot of this is in the absence of a true global reserve currency, which now we have in the form of Bitcoin. But even before that, back to your BRICS question, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, and China, full of strong personalities in the leadership. Do you really think that over the long term that there's not going to be some kind of tug of war between how the decisions are going to be made between those countries? And there's other strong nations. So in theory, it's a good idea, you know, to say, well, I would say a lot of them are dissatisfied with the control that the US have. So what way do we take it down? We all club together and we try and take down the dollar by having this joint currency. But when you look at it again, what I spoke about, where Satoshi removed himself, because you have somebody in control of that, inevitably over time, the human element of it is going to be the downfall. And again, I don't think there's bad people. I think there's bad incentives in there. And once you control the incentives, that's when it happens. So I see BRICS probably gaining a lot of traction, but I see it ultimately failing. I don't know what the timeline is. I'll make a prediction on it. I can't make a prediction on it. I'm not that much in depth in the studies of that. But looking at it over time, looking at it through history, looking at the setup, it's not likely to be the world reserve currency. And if it is, it's not going to be very long. So if you've got the dollar, which I think has already lost its not technical status, but yeah, in theory, it's
standing
already,
maybe. People
yeah,
people are pretending to protect themselves from the dollar and
yeah,
from the dollar as it's after being weaponized, because it's been shown what they can do with it now. So these
yeah,
countries are starting to be aware, and individuals and people are starting to learn
yeah.
about what's
And if
going
you
on.
if you were to trade with somebody, you can use the euro, you can use the yen, you can use the BRICS currency, you can use the US dollar. But again, and I know a lot of it's converted into their own currency over time. But to me, there's only one trusted currency at the global level, which is going to be trusted for by everyone. It doesn't need trust really between humans, and that's the beauty of it, really. And that's going to be Bitcoin, and that's why I see a Bitcoin standard inevitable over, barring the black swan event or the unexpected event that nobody can see. Then yeah, it's the obvious choice from here, and you always have to think about these things rationally. And there's only one solution for global trade over time, and yeah, like it's built, it's ready. Anyone can settle billions of dollars within 10 minutes on the main base chain of Bitcoin. So yeah, to me, I've got high conviction, I've got high belief that this is going to be the future. And I think if you look at technologies like the internet, where people didn't understand it, once they started to understand it, once the ecosystem started growing out, once education started happening, it took place. And once it goes, there's no turning back. So
yeah. I think as well, I've been following a lot about this BRICS as well. And what I can see is with the 11 countries that are in it now, they are strong countries and they are making moves. But when 50 or 60 countries are working together, right? So it's hard for maybe 11 countries to knock the dollar off its standing. But when 50 or 60 countries decide to dub the dollar altogether in one go and announce it altogether, and I think that's what's being lined up at the moment behind the scenes, because there's a lot of moves being made around the world with all these other countries, and they all want to join the BRICS. Yeah, so
yeah,
I think next year is going to be a big key. You know what I mean? And what's going to happen? Like if they decide to announce it all together in one go, that they're not trading in the dollar and they're going to be trading in their own currencies, and all them dollars start flowing back to America, it's going to be huge inflation in America.
yep, yeah, and
I think I think it's coming sooner than most people think.
yeah, I can never put a timeline on these things, and some things come out and surprise you, as I say, like the death of the dollar back in 2022 as a world reserve currency. So some of these things you can never put a timeline on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's been a couple of chess moves in between in that as well. So yeah, and I think the whole thing, like there's obviously a lot of violence in the world when it comes to geopolitical tension, and I don't think
Let's talk a little bit about that as well, maybe a little bit, yeah. Like like there's a lot of things happening over in the east at the moment with Ukraine and all this thing. You know what I mean? And can you see the Americans or the British or something going in and starting something there to try and protect the currencies?
To be honest, I don't get into too much of the that side of things, and what will happen next. What I would say is the fiat system that we have today, because a country has the ability to create its own currency, is sucking resources from its own citizens to divert it towards a war. So, and again, these are kind of thoughts that whenever you first hear them or say them or think them, you're like, that sounds crazy to everyone. But the fiat system leads to the easy enablement of war. And I think that's what's happened here as well. And people call Bitcoin the peaceful revolution. And whether it's a revolution or not, you can see the benefits in having a fixed currency to prevent people from going to war rather than a currency that you can print. So we'll just use two kind of peaceful countries that aren't at war with each other. So say Ireland and Belgium, and Ireland can create their own money. They can fund their own war, and they want something off Belgium. You can go in and you can create that war, and you can sustain it for quite a long time as well. Especially if you're a productive country, you can sustain it for 20 years. Now, without getting too political, the US sustained a war for 20 years against Afghanistan, and people only questioned recently, where did that money come from? But it came from the creation of money, and people think, yeah, it's only taxes. Taxes fund a certain amount, but the money creation. But back to the example, if Ireland had a fixed supply of money, we'll just say money, we'll not say Bitcoin. So say it had, and just using round numbers, if it had 10 billion in reserves for its country, and all the money in the world was fixed. So it's got 10 billion units of this, and to go to war for 5 years with a country, a neutral country that they had a desire to try and invade and get resources from. If you did, it might be successful, and you come back with extra resources, and you've conquered an area. But what happens if it takes half your resources to start that war, and you don't want it, and you can't create more money, and you can't create any value, and you can't extract it off people, through money creation? Then it actually prevents you, and you think you have second thoughts of going to war in that country. So then everything in your country becomes a resource that you have to make a choice over, and there's pros and cons to everything. Whereas now, a central authority in any country can make a decision to go to war, and the citizens really don't have a say in that. So to me, there's plenty of reasons why Bitcoin benefits the world, and I think one of them is that it promotes a kind of non-violent approach. You're economically incentivized to be more productive in your country and to build your country up, rather than going and attacking another country where you're risking quite a lot. You lose it, and you're putting your citizens' lives at risk economically. So yeah, it's an interesting, and as I say, you can go into these kind of rabbit holes over and over again, and they sound strange the first time you see it, you hear them, and you say, Bitcoin's a peaceful revolution, fiat is enablement of war. But once you really think about it, again, practically, it's all about incentives.
Yeah. So let's go into the evolution of money. So we're in fiat currency now. What can you see happening in the future with these CBDCs and what they're talking about? Yeah, I've been looking into these for nearly 2 years now, and it's
Yeah,
getting closer and closer. So explain to
good.
the viewers about what are CBDCs or.
Yeah, good question. Again, nobody can see into the future, but to me, like if I was to summarize CBDCs is an attempt to control almost every transaction within a country. And I think some of these things or jurisdiction. I think some of these things are set out with good intentions and maybe uninformed consequences from people. And some people, I think, truly do believe that CBDCs are better because they'll stop, quote unquote, money laundering and stuff like this. But I think humans always have a desire over time for freedom. Everyone wants freedom. Nobody wants to be restricted. And I think the first instance where you explain to somebody that, again, we've seen this at the country level, a certain government doesn't like how our country behaves, so they sanction them. Put that on an individual level, and what happens if you do something in your country that your government doesn't like, and they can sanction your payments or freeze your payments or say that you've bought too much of one good or not another. So CBDC is really just a centralized version of fiat, and I speak about this in a couple of previous conferences where money is kept centralizing the fiat system over years. It kind of had gold in vaults, and people gave the receipts and redeem them, and then there was a ban on gold, and then there was a depegging of the dollar to gold, and the next step then is the CBDCs. And it's a scary thought, that somebody else can control every action that you have, because a lot of our actions are economically driven. Like what you want to purchase, where you want to go, how you want to go about your day. And if somebody's able to control that, it's gone too far, to be honest. And that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin was created, to try and give back freedom to people. And you see this in other countries as well. And I don't profess to understand the ins and outs of it, but I can see some examples in China where there's a social credit score. And, if you're not behaving as a good citizen and you don't have access to certain things, and it even happens here in a way, like if you don't have a good credit score, you don't have access to credit and mortgages where other people do. But that's, I know it's not a like for like example, but that's the way that it could go in the future with the CBDC. And I will do everything that I can to educate people on what the difference is between Bitcoin and CBDCs, because there's likelihood as well that people will see the same thing. People see Bitcoin as just a digital money. They actually think it's the same as somebody transferring money from Revolut to Revolut and say, well, I've already got this, so why do I need Bitcoin? But it's the underlying. I always say that Bitcoin, although it's an advancement in gold in terms of money, it isn't there to solve a technology problem. It's there to solve a fundamental money problem. Like you can try all you want with centralized technology to make it better, but that doesn't make the fundamental fiat system any better. It's still a fiat system, and it's still a controlled centralized system. So yeah, CBDCs, I'm not a fan, as you can hear. I do think there will be multiple attempts, but I think as soon as people see that I wouldn't say I'm completely anti-government, but I would say that governments are experts in encroachment. Like they take these inches at a time, and it might start off with a few incentives to get into the CBDC. Maybe if you use it, you get on your diesel or your petrol, whatever, you get 5% saving, and people will start using it, going, oh, I'm going to use this because it's actually giving me a saving, and that's just a way for people to get into it. But then over time, it ends up at a complete control system where if you don't do, it's the possibility that if you don't do what a government that's in power wants, then you could lose access to your money. You could also have things like time expiry on a currency, so they want to try and stimulate the economy, and whatever you earn in your salary this week has to be spent within 12 months, so you can't actually save it. So there's so many pitfalls and downfalls, and I think you can paint this very dystopian future for something like a CBDC, but that's the reality of it. Again, you always have to be practical about these things.
And as well, if there's a regime change or a political change in your
Oh,
country, things
yeah,
might be all right now, but in 4 years' time or in 8 years' time, and somebody else comes in and they have different ideas about how
yeah.
to run the country, it's very easy for them then once that CBDC is in.
Yeah, and the common theme here throughout the whole thing, Lawrence, as we're talking, is humans being in charge with all the good intentions, the incentive systems. If it's not set up, like humans shouldn't be in control of money. Like it should be completely decentralized. It should be completely like imagine you were able to control the sun, or one country was able to control the sun and the temperature and how long a day was and stuff like that. There's some things that are in nature that should be completely left to its own devices, and instead of us trying to work that around ourselves, so instead of us trying to change the amount of daylight hours, or the length of a day and stuff like that, just to try and benefit somebody, like that's going to cause an earthquake or a tsunami on another side of the world. This is the thing that people are playing with. It should be left, and we should be working around the 4 seasons that we have in terms of weather. Like we work around that and we build systems around that. So let Bitcoin be that decentralized system that's very nature-like, and it's actually, again, more of a philosophical view, but it's that piece of the closest thing that you could say is a man-made piece of nature where it's completely decentralized, and we shouldn't, well, we're not able to mess with it, so we have to work around it. Let it be money, instead of meddling with everyone else's money. So yeah, the human element is the flaw in it. And as I say, I believe that humans are very good and very, obviously, 99.9% of humans you meet are very, very good people, and very positive on the outlook for humanity. But when it comes to incentives over time, if somebody controls money, it's always going to end up the same way. And the history books have been written already and shown many examples of that. So Bitcoin's the solution to this problem.
Yeah. And we can see as well over time, from times gone past, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great ideas have started, and once humans get their fingers into it and get their paws into it, sometimes a lot of times they mess it up over time.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes unintentionally too. Like there's people that
Yeah.
are maybe have good intentions now trying to set an interest rate for the country, and you don't know what knock-on effect that has. And they might have the best intentions and the best data, but it still could be wrong, and what's right or what's wrong in that situation, nobody knows. But they're trying to balance scales that there's too many variables that they can't control. So it's an impossible job to try and control money, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, it's going to be messed up some way. Just let it be automated, let it run, let it be decentralized. Nobody controls it, and we work around the money rather than trying to work the money around us.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So, yeah. Any last points there that you'd like to say to the audience about anything? How?
No, probably just on my very first point. So or one of the very first points I made. So I spend more and more time talking to people about Bitcoin, and I think the messages are getting clearer, and it's getting easier as the years go by. There's clear progress. Like trying to chat to somebody in 2014, you sounded crazy. Probably even 5 years ago, you sounded crazy, and now it's kind of more acceptable. So I think in this part of the world, it's important that we get this right soon. As I say, US, Africa, Central America, South America are all making progress. And I feel this part of the world, even though we're on here in Ireland having a talk about it, which is great and shows you the progress, even this one interaction probably wouldn't happen 5-10 years ago. So it's improving, but it's still lagging behind. So I would say it's up to us, it's up to you, Lawrence, it's up to me, it's up to people to be advocates for this technology. Again, no marketing team. And it enables, like, I know we can paint again the dystopian future and say we need it to save humanity and stuff like that, but I see it as, we need it to enable freedom, and see it in a more positive light. So I start having this conversation more frequently with people, and I want to see other people doing that as well. I want to see it being more of a topic for discussion. Again, it's in the US elections now. It's going to be discussed. You've seen probably Trump announced yesterday, or Bitcoin conference in the US. Whatever your opinion is of the conference, it's regardless. They've got a US presidential candidate on the stage talking about Bitcoin. But what have we got here in the political space? What have we got in the company space? What have we got in the individual space? We're behind, and we need to step it up. So yeah, I want to see this country thrive. I want to see this part of the world thrive, and I think that's up to me, you, and people listening here who feel the same way to go out and advocate it. And I don't mean go out with banners and start parading it, but just bringing in that conversation. If you see where a problem is for somebody and they're struggling because of inflation, or a certain challenge, and you can relate it back to Bitcoin in a way, and that could solve the problem in the long term, then bring it up as a conversation. Don't be afraid. Just keep pushing the right message, especially if you believe that it's going to lead to a better future.
Yeah, very good, very good. And if people want to read your book, how would they get it?
Yeah, the
Process?
book is I it's like, I don't know how long it took me to write it altogether, but to me it's not a return on investment. I don't see it that way. It ties in with what I just said. It's all about education and educating people in this part of the world, and all around the world, but yeah, particularly this area. You can get it on Amazon at the moment. That was the best way for distributing the book. I think it's only £6, £5, £6, €7, something like that.
Well, nothing like it's very affordable. Very
Yeah,
affordable. It's a
it's
great,
a
great
small
book as
book.
well.
Yeah, it's 135 pages, so it's not big. So I can't justify putting a big price tag on it, but also I don't want to, because I want more people to read it and understand it. And I think that, yeah, Amazon's the best way to get it. I'm going to try and do some work on locally. I hand out quite a lot of free books as well, and I don't mind that. I listened to a podcast a couple of days ago, and Seyfried Moose was saying he's had 1 million copies sold of the Bitcoin Standard, which is a fantastic book, by the way. And I think I'm still yet to reach 1,000. And Lynn Alden, I think, was up at 50-odd thousand as well within our first 2 months. So it's not a big seller. I don't promote it a lot, but it's available on Amazon. And to save anyone buying multiple copies, like, just read it. You can probably do it in a few hours and pass it on to a friend. So to me, it's not about sales. Also, I would say if you do buy it off Amazon, just leave the review as well. It's got very good feedback, to be fair. But leave the review and reach out to me if you have any comments on it. I'm on Twitter as well. Chris Mac_L. If anybody wants to follow and give feedback on it as well, and the link is on my Twitter profile.
Yeah, well, we put all the links for the Amazon page and all your Twitter links into the description below. And Chris, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story. It was great talking to you about bricks, macro, maybe what's coming. As you said, we can't predict the future, but I've got a little crystal ball there, and things have been turning out right from this little crystal ball that I have here. So
Yeah.
uh,
It's going to be an
thank you.
interesting few years. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. And as I say, I don't see the doomsday scenario overall. I think the faster we get on to Bitcoin, I see only positive. So, and yeah, thank you for having me on the show as well. You're doing great work.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
All right. Cheers, Lawrence.